Kababayan, today we're having a very interesting panel called Preserving Philippine Indigenous Culture and Communities. And now, Know History, Know Self with Professor Brandon Reilly.
Despite that culture, defined in the dictionary as, quote, the customs, arts, social institutions, and achievements of a particular nation, people, or other social group, end quote, is something that has existed in human society since their beginning, this concept of culture as a thing that we all have which differentiates us from one another and is a sum total of everything we do in daily life is relatively new. It assumed its form only in the 19th century. When we think of preserving culture, therefore, we are in fact trying to conserve something that people only thought of conserving not even 200 years ago. In the Philippines, this notion of preserving culture isn't even that old. Before Spanish colonization in 1521, people in the Philippines reproduced their life ways from generation to generation simply because it was natural and useful to do so. Why change what worked? And they were open to new things when those new things proved useful. Our modern notion of culture and the need to preserve it would probably seem alien to them. Spanish colonialism, which was largely religious in nature, sought to preserve Filipino culture in one sense. Once the peoples they called Indios, Spanish for Indians, were Christianized, the missionaries sought to preserve their now Christian culture. Of course, to make them Christian in the first place necessitated destroying the culture that existed beforehand. At the same time, the colonizers also sought to preserve their own Spanish culture because they believed it to be superior to that of the peoples they ruled over. When the first nationalists, Graciano Lopez Jaena, Rizal, Plaridel, and others, thought about this new thing called culture in the late 19th century, they at first sought to preserve one culture, that of the Spanish. Yet at the same time, they worked to recover an ancient Filipino past through studying and writing about a long submerged history, languages, and folklore. When the Americans colonized the Philippines in 1898, they tried in earnest to preserve Filipino culture. That is, Filipino culture of a particular sort. They sought to conserve the highly diverse cultures of the upland peoples in Luzon and Mindanao, peoples they lumped together with the term non-Christian tribes. While this sounds altruistic, it in fact had a quite sinister purpose. Articulating how savage, wild, and uncivilized these peoples were, worked to legitimate continued American rule. What about the mostly Christian lowland majority, all the peoples, Tagalog, Visayans, Ilocanos, and others that we think of as Filipinos today? Well, the Americans weren't concerned about them. In fact, not unlike the Spanish before them, they viewed the majority's culture as deficient and hence in need of change. This premise was the origin of the thing we call today the Filipinos' colonial mentality, which is alive and well. When the notion of cultural preservation as we understand it came about, well after independence in 1946, it in fact built on this American legacy in some surprising ways.
Maraming salamat mga kababayan for tuning in. Next week, we will discuss Ninoy Aquino Day, and then on August 25, join me and our panel once again. We will discuss preserving Philippine indigenous cultures and communities. Maraming salamat to our panel, and thank you for watching us. We'll see you all again next time. Salamat po.